Hi chess friends, this is KingsExecutor, and the French defense is the next opening we're going to discuss on this channel, and I want to give you a guide how to play the different variations. The French is rather an opening of a positional play, and therefore has less concrete lines, rather ideas. And to start off with, of course, it is inappropriate to start with any other game than the one played by Viktor Korchnoi. And this is from 2012, from the CEG versus Legends. And Korchnoi, having the black pieces, had the white opponent Alexandre, Domont. And here we see him employing the French. And in this position you can choose between the classical variation, which you can transpose to by the Alekhine. Let's just drop back. If we have e4 and knight f6 and the early knight c3 line, then we can play e6, and after d4 we have the same opening. Of course, white can play e5, but this is totally fine, and then we can play d6 soon, knight c6, and pressurize this pawn. Okay, just let's go back. So in this position you can play the Winnover. The idea of the Winnover is to weaken this pawn. This is not defended anymore by the knight on c3, so e5 is the main move. Afterwards c5. And if a3, you take this and you develop your pieces and you castle, mostly short. Okay, let's go back to the actual game. Korchnoi chose the classical variation, and after bishop g5 you get your bishop out, e5, takes, and now white managed to exchange his bad bishop, which is the bishop of the same color as his central pawns, and the black dark squared bishop is the actual nice piece of the black side, which is exchanged off, and this is the rather bad bishop in the French. And the idea is sometimes to play b6 and bishop out to a6 to exchange off white's good bishop. Queen d2, preparing long castling maybe, a6, keeping a knight or a bishop out of b5. And now an rather slow but interesting idea of white. The knight is dropped back to be able to play c3, c6, knight c6, f4. Yeah, white has to work a lot to keep his center together, but in this rather blocked center he can afford to do this. In blocked positions tempi don't count as much. f6, a typical French move to liberate the position. Knight f3, takes, and castles. And Korchnoi, with this opening, managed to have an open f-file to work with, and well, as you can tell, black is leading in development here. Then negative side of the black position is this bad bishop, but it can come here or even to this square and have a nice diagonal down here. Knight f2 by white, knight b6. Now you see the bishop can move to d7 if needed, but also the knight looks at c4. Maybe it can harass the white queen there. Bishop d3, knight c4 would be possible, but white would simply take that off. Bishop d7, castles, and knight b4 here, attacking the good bishop, which is the most active piece and the most aggressive piece, looking at h7. And if this bishop is exchanged, white doesn't have a lot of firepower to attack black, and afterwards black can look forward to use his open files. b3 to keep a knight out of c4, takes, and bishop b5 pinning the knight. It's unpinned and taken, so this bad bishop is exchanged off, and white has a little bit more space in the center, but there are so many pieces exchanged. White doesn't really have a lot to work with here. Now you see these rooks look a little bit funny. This rook is already active, and this one can come over, and this is exactly what Korchnoi did, so black is not worse here. Queen d2, queen a3, which is a funny move in a way, because it stops a4, which, if we look at it, a4 would threaten a5, kicking the knight, gaining tempo, and a5 by black to block it wouldn't be possible because of the queen which just went to the d2. By the way, I wanted to say that I didn't analyze this game beforehand, so if I miss one of a possible line which you would like to see, that's because I didn't analyze this game beforehand. This is a rather positional opening, and this is why I just analyze it spontaneously here. Again, queen a3. This is a Benko gambit idea as well, this queen move. In the Benko gambit, you can imagine that these pawns are gone, and afterwards the queen, which went on a5, can come to a3 to block the pawns and to stop any pawn march by white. Knight g5, attacking e6, and the queen just drops back, and this is because of a4 can be met by a5 now, because the knight would be hanging and the queen cannot take on a5. So this is not losing time here to go back and forth. Knight f3, and now black could have repeated the position, but Korchnoi thought, well, my position is promising and okay, I can play on. And being the stronger player, this is a good thing to do. h6 to stop this idea by white to play knight g5. And if a4 in this position, well, white can take on c1, exchange pieces. You see this knight is covering c8, so you can immediately reposition another rook to the c file, exchange pieces off, and yeah. So this rook was taken, and knight took back, interestingly, to reposition itself to a better location. Rook c1 and knight a7. Yeah, as you can tell, the knight was on b6, and c6 is better to attack these pawns here. Maybe rook takes as a sacrifice at some moment. Could be in the mix, in the right position, of course, when the queen forgets to defend the pawn, and taking with check could be an idea to keep in mind. Rook c5, knight c6, b4, g5. Well, in a blocked position, you can afford to push your kingside pawns with the minimum risk. h3 to stop g4, queen f7. And as you can tell, playing a positional opening and being the stronger player, you see that black managed to really actively locate and position every piece here. And I'm not so sure if white's queen is as actively placed as black's queen. a4, queen f4, queen c2, which looks a little bit funny. Okay, it threatens queen g6 check, so king g7 is the logical move, and now white is the one sacrificing the exchange for initiative and a pawn. g4, black doesn't lack initiative as well. Now the knight is threatened to the pin on g2. It's unprotected, so king f2 to protect it, and now we can take the pawn with check. And after king g3, queen takes b4. So who is in charge of the tactics here? Queen takes a6 is answered by queen f4 check and king h3. Well, if king f2, the e pawn falls, so king h3. Queen f5 check, king g3, king h8 to get out of any check possibility for white. Queen e2 covers this pawn, so this king can get out of the checks. But after queen to f4 check, white resigned because the a pawn is falling, and being an exchange down and a pawn down, a passed pawn in this case, white resigned. Was there a better move than queen a4? Well, it's quite hopeless. King is safe for at least 2 tempi, and the white king is open to checks. You can see this check route if the king moves to f2 as well. Of course, on f2 the pawn is falling, as I said, and this is just a hopelessly lost position. So after queen e2 and check, losing the a pawn, white resigned. I would like to know your thoughts about the French. Is there a particular variation which you like very much or play exclusively as black. What I always thought as white, I really had problems playing against the French because I never learned the main line moves, especially for white, and black's game is really easy. It's actually, of course, in some positions it's not that easy. You sometimes have very complex positions. For example, a move like a6 here, it's not necessary. You can play castles, and if c5 in this position, it would be bad due to this knight on d7, which would block the protection of c7. And if you have to defend c7 after knight b5, then in this case a check would disturb the black castling rights. So this is the only thing that you have to keep in mind with an early c5, if a knight b4 b5 move is okay for black or not. And that's all you have to worry about as black in the early opening, and later on a kingside attack for white is the other thing you have to worry about as black. But it seems to me that by this c5 move, if white castles long, that that black is very much faster on the queen side in many lines. So white probably has to castle short, and therefore you have a long strategical game by playing castle short and then f6 and destroy white's center and trying to mobilize your central pawns. So I hope you liked the video. Please rate it, subscribe and comment. Thanks.